Hello, everyone. Today, I have the pleasure to interview our 19th guest for 2024, Javier Malave, who is also a believer of our Lord Jesus Christ. Mr. Malave is deeply passionate about sharing his faith journey, which is filled with profound and transformative experiences. Mr. Malave and his family face numerous challenges, including eviction, homelessness, drug addiction, and infidelity. Each of these trials has only deepened his reliance on God's grace, strengthened his faith. Mr. Malabed is also an author, blogger, and podcaster. Mr. Malabed is also a survivor of Guillain-Barré syndrome, GBS. Mr. Malabed's battle with GBS was intense and was intubated for 6 days, and the doctors advised his wife to prepare for the worst. However, God had other plans and conducted a miraculous intervention. As a result, he recovered and is now sharing his incredible testimony with others. Mr. Malabé will share a little bit about his background, how he became a Christian, and then we'll go on to discussing the topic for today, which is overcoming adversity. So we welcome Mr. Malabé to Be an Encourager podcast on this day. And my first question to you, Mr. Malabé, can you share a little bit about your background? How did you become a Christian, and how and when did you feel the need that you needed to change, and why?
Sure. Hi, Clarabelle. Thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it, and God bless everyone that's listening and watching. Um, I became a believer at 16 years old at a
Mhm.
youth meeting in my parents' home. Um, they decided to put I believe the at the time was the youth department needed a place to have a meeting, and we lived right next door to the church. And my mom offered her living room.
Mhm.
And obviously, I'm 16 years old, and I'm going, "What the heck is this? What are all these people in my house? Who are these people?" And it was a Pentecostal church, so it's very charismatic. And for some reason, the gentleman who was speaking, or the young man, he's now a pastor, Pastor John Rivera, God bless. Um, he was the youth leader, and he
Mhm.
was talking, and for some reason something resonated in me and something he said, and I said, you know what, this seems something that I'd probably be interested in trying and seeing what comes of this.
Mhm.
And we did the prayer of confession in the bathroom on my mother's first floor. So that's actually where all my faith journey started.
Wonderful, great testimony, and that's great that you started at an early age.
Mhm.
Now, my second question to you today is in Second Corinthians chapter 4, verse 8 and 9 states, we are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. In life, we go through many difficult seasons in our journey, which challenge us to the core, challenge our faith, challenge us financially, challenge our health, and challenge us in many other ways that make us feel like we are being crushed in despair. Can you
Mhm.
share about a time that you experienced the eviction and homelessness, and what series of event precipitated this experience? And what did you learn from these experiences? And what you recommend for someone who is going through this similar experience right now?
Oh, sure.
and and
Go ahead.
and how were you able to get out of get your life back in order after going through these experiences?
Oh, sure. I'll be glad to share that. The eviction issue started. We had lived in Queens, New York. I'm from New York City, and
Hmm.
we lived in Queens, New York, for a long time. Raised both my children there, and they had sold. My parents had sold the house, so we had to move to the Bronx.
Hmm.
Fortunately, New York City is not very conducive for cheap rent. So that was at the time the only place we were able to afford, and it wasn't the best place, wasn't the greatest place, and at that time I wasn't in the right state of mind. I was going through a lot of mental issues, a lot of personal issues, a lot of marital issues at the time. So why moving put a lot of stressors on everything, on our
Mhm.
marriage, on just everything. And I became involved with just so many things where I wasn't managing my money correctly. And I
Mhm.
was just not thinking about anything, and I just kept not paying the rent, and then trying to, and pretty much not caring at that time, not being the responsible man that I was supposed to be. We got to a point where the rent was just ridiculously overdue, and I was taken to eviction court. And
Mhm.
to be honest with you, that is the most embarrassing, most humiliating, most uh I guess embarrassing moment in my life.
Mhm.
Sit there, and it's just the way that they treat you, the way they talk to you, and to be in that position where you're begging not to get thrown out of your apartment, and
Yes.
you're literally asking them, please give me another chance. And it got to the point where we were very, very close to just getting thrown out of our apartment. Now I had my one of my children was living with me, another one just moved out.
Mhm.
And we were to the point, and I decided at one time I went into my bedroom and I just dropped to my knees and I said, "That's it, God. I can't do this anymore. I'm done. I am so done. I don't know what else to do. I give up. I give up. I've tried everything I could on my own. I've always thought, because I'm Hispanic, and Hispanic men are taught that they're responsible for everything. You do everything, you're responsible. Don't let anyone take care of you. You do it. And I just put everything on God's hands, and God just said, nothing happened. No miracle happened. No immediate money came by or whatever, but there was this sort of peace that came after I just threw everything to him. That just like I didn't know where any money was coming from. I didn't know how we were going to pay, where we were going to move to. I didn't know any of that. All I know is I felt this relaxation, if that's the correct word,
Yes.
peace,
That's God's peace. Mhm.
yeah, this overwhelming, like, yeah, you got this. Okay. Now, don't get me wrong, my anxiety was at a billion, but there
Mhm.
was something my spirit was saying, yeah, I got this. And to cut the story short, um, we went to court. Obviously, you make the arrangements and everything, and there's assistance that helps you here in New York City, but it's very hard to get. You
Mhm.
have to really apply, and you have to really jump hoops. And one thing about me is that I don't give up. I'm very resourceful and stuff. Where if you need me to write a letter, write this, I pretty much do that.
Mhm.
I prayed to God and I said, God, this is in your hands. I don't know what else to do. And we prayed, and my wife, who's an amazing prayer warrior, and my family and everyone else, and we got a call. Actually, almost 2 weeks before our eviction last visit at court for the eviction date. And
Mhm.
2 weeks before that, we got a call stating that our rent was covered for the next
Oh,
6 months.
that's amazing. That's great. That's a
Yeah.
miracle in
Oh
itself, you
yeah.
know?
In itself, yeah. I mean, I can't even explain. I say it now, and my hair's in my arms and everything still stands up because it's just, I just had to cry, and I got this at work, this call at work, and I just started to cry at
Wow.
work. They're wondering why, and I'm just like, because my God is real.
Yes.
That's all I said. I didn't even explain what the situation was. All I said was, "My God is real," and yeah, and that's how we. And then other one that was the, as they call, the icing on the cake. We
Mhm.
always wanted to move to the city. I've always been an East Village person. I love the East Village. I don't know if you're aware of what the East Village is in New York City, but it's just where all the artists and just the trends and everything is pretty much is the center of the city.
Oh,
And
wow.
and I grew
What
up. Yeah.
what street is that? I'm sorry that I
Well,
cut you
it's
off, but
no, no, no. It's actually the East Village goes from like east from Third Avenue to Avenue C, from 14th to 23rd, I believe. That's the East Village, and then it can go into the what they call the Lower East Side, the LES, and all that area is all by Washington Square Park, all that area,
Mm-hmm.
NYU,
Oh.
Washington Square Park. That's the area that I always was around as a young man, and my wife and I, when we were dating, would always be around there, and we'd
Mm-hmm.
always wanted to move there. And an opportunity came where we applied for an apartment uh, here in the village, and we applied 2 years into moving into the Bronx. Something that I just happened to do. I said, you know, and my sister
Mm-hmm.
said, fill out the paperwork. What is it going to cost you? The worst they can say is no, right? And we said, yeah, there's no way they were going to let us live in this, especially with everything that's going on, and just God is does what He wants to do in His timing and His way. His ways are not our ways are not His ways. Our thoughts are not His thoughts. And
Mm-hmm.
we received a letter offering us an apartment here in New York, in the city, and that was one of the most amazing things that God has ever, next to my children and my wife and everything else. That was, I think, the icing on the cake after everything that we went through, my family and I, during our eviction process and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the short part, or you know, of everything that's happened to that part.
Well, it sounds like you went through a very challenging and difficult situation, and you surrender it to God, and you allow God to work, in the process. And
Mhm.
like you mentioned, just so the listeners can understand a little bit, that whole process with the eviction, it's very challenging, very difficult, and you have to make sure that you provide paperwork to the court in a timely manner. I'm familiar with the process because I used to work with the homeless
Mhm.
individuals,
So
and
you
I
know
know that
the
whole
whole
process. So
drama, yeah, of everything.
it's
It's
very
it's not even
challenging.
it's not even and honestly, it's not even all the paperwork. It's just the way that you're treated.
Mhm.
It's
Yes.
the way that you're looked at, the way you're talked to. You're talked to as if you're non-deserving to be there. Like they're doing you.
Mm,
You're the least of the persons because you're in that situation. and
mm,
and the way I believe is people in that situation should be even pulled up even more because they're already
yes.
down as it is, right? We're already
Hmm.
depressed, we're already sad. Now, don't get me wrong, there are people there that should be they're prosecuted. There are people who do things really illegally and do things wrong, but there are
Hmm.
people there who are struggling,
Yes.
in general, that we just could not do it. And
Yes.
the idea that they looked at us like we were non-deserving because we couldn't pay our rent, like it was just really, really eye-opening and sad, because a
Hmm.
lot of it I did on my own. I had to face the judge on my own. I had to
Hmm.
face all that on my own because my family worked, and my wife had children, and so all that I did on my own.
Hmm.
So that was also very, I say on my own, but obviously God was there at all times. He had my back, which I didn't know. Um, but yeah, that's the situation. So if people go through that, yeah, just you know, be prepared to just be humble, be understanding that they also have a job to do, and they
Yes.
also have things they need to follow and rules. So we all just have to be understanding to each other. And that's where the love of Christ comes through, where we have to love the person, even if the person is annoying or is not understanding or they're being very mean. You have to show them love. And I think with that, they calm down and they help you even more sometimes.
Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. I work in the that field, so I know. But I always treated my clients really great. Because I sympathize with them. You said, like the love of Christ, it can happen to anyone and they can go through very difficult times. So it doesn't mean that they're a bad person or anything like that. And like you mentioned before, there are some people that, yes, they take advantage of the system and, they've been helped before and it's almost like a recycling
Exactly.
process for them.
There was
So,
one lady there, and,
mhm.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but there was just one, and that this is what really got me really upset. Was she was there, and this was like her fourth or fifth time. Like she knew the process. Like she explained to me like the whole process of what to do. And I'm like, how do you know? She goes, yeah, I've done this about 4 or 5 times. They're always. I'm like, wow. And then there are people that can't do it even once, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what got me a little bit, upset at the time, or sad actually. But like you said, there are people who do work the system,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, in everything. They know how to work the system. But yeah, yeah, it was a very, very rough time, those 2.5, almost 3 years in the Bronx. Very tough.
Well, I'm very glad that it turned out to be a blessing for you and your family. So I'm going to go on to my next question. There is a quote by Catherine Pulsifer, can pronounce her her last name, that states, "Adversity in our life may seem like a problem. However, adversity can make us grow and learn in an opportunity that we may never have experienced. It all depends on how you look at it." From your bio, we learned that you have experienced a lot of adversity and challenges in your life. You also share that you had a struggle with drug addiction that impacted your life significantly. Can you share about your struggle with addiction? How difficult has this experience been, and what negative consequences did it cause you? And
Sure.
what do you recommend for a person who is currently struggling with addiction, that they can do? And what has helped you in the past? How did it help? And what type of intervention do you recommend for others?
Sure, sure. My addiction actually started, which is really strange. Most people start their addiction when they're young. My addiction started actually in my early 30s, which is
Mm,
really crazy. I was working at a job that actually was very open to a lot of crazy things. Let's just say that.
mhm,
And at that time in my life, I was not doing well with anything, with Christ, with my family, with my wife and stuff. So um, I hung around with these people, and eventually the cocaine started coming around. And to be honest with you, the first time I took the hit, it was, like in everything, it's an amazing thing, right? It's
mhm,
that's what everyone chases when you're a drug addict. Everyone chases that first high, right?
mhm,
Chasing that dragon, and that's what causes the addiction. So I became pretty much addicted to cocaine for about 4 years, 5 years of my life. During that time, and my daughters, they call it daddy's bad time.
wow,
Um, because for those 5 years, I pretty much didn't even acknowledge my family per se, my kids or whatever. I did what I needed to do. I paid the rent, paid whatever, but there was no relationship. My relationship was with my music and the people and my drugs. That's all I wanted. My drugs, alcohol, and whatever. That's what made me, um, I guess, fulfilled at that time.
mhm,
Um, there was nothing else that I needed, and I was looking for that. And it came to the point where I couldn't even pay. And at that time, I was living in my mom's house. We lived in the upstairs apartment. My parents owned the house. I couldn't
mhm,
even pay my parents the rent. Like, I had time paying the rent because I was spending all my money in drugs. And I think the day I realized that this is really getting bad is one Christmas I had no money to buy my kids gifts, none.
mhm,
And the last $80, and I can still remember this, the last $80 that I had that I could have bought gifts for them, I went and used it to buy an 8 ball. So that's when I realized, wow, the priorities, right?
mhm,
That's how bad the addiction is. You decide that getting high is much more important than having your kids smile or be happy. Thank God for my wife. Thank God for
mhm,
my mom, my sister, my dad, and my sister-in-laws, who I love very much. They backed me up in a sense where they didn't know what I was doing. They didn't know anything that was happening, but they, you know, got gifts for my kids and did everything that I couldn't do at the time. And what was really strange is that I was very good at hiding it. I was what they call a functioning addict.
mhm,
I was very good at hiding it. My parents would never, I mean, I would never be in a situation where I was so high that I didn't know what I was doing. Now, I pretty much was high enough that I didn't know, but I thought I didn't know, if you understand what
mhm.
I'm saying. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, it got to that point where it was really, I didn't know what, it was just, that was my life. My life was just alcohol, drugs, And what's crazy about it is I was involved in church. I was
Mhm.
in a praise and worship team. I
Oh,
was
wow.
part of a group in a church. I was a member. I was involved, and I did everything and anything. And but like they said, I lived a dual life. You know, you did the Sunday service
Mhm.
or the weekday, and then after that, you just, you know, you lived the life of Riley, as they say. You just nothing. It didn't phase me. Um,
Mhm.
you know, because I always believe, well, if at least I go on Sunday, I'm okay. You know,
Mhm.
I'm doing the right thing. I'm playing. I'm worshiping you. That's what you wanted, right? So, but that was
Mhm.
my mental state at the time. Um, but yeah, I was for about almost 5 years of nonstop cocaine and alcohol.
Mhm.
So yeah, it got to that point where I just decided, you know, that was it. That was it. When I can't afford to pay my kids Christmas gifts or things like that, and I think God also intervened in that where
Mhm.
I found a new job, right? And He took me out of that situation that I was in, where I was in my previous position, where I had access to everything.
Mhm.
So He took me out of that and found me a new job. Um, and I guess part of that, and then part of asking God, you know, my wife, who is an amazing prayer warrior, um, praying for me, um, not giving up, and just my, I guess, always had that faith in me, and that's, so the Holy Spirit was always there, saying, you know,
Yes.
I'm there, I'm here, just give me a chance, you know, stop holding me down, or just stop blocking me. And I decided, you know what, again, let's try it again, you know. And
Mhm.
one thing I wanted to say, and I don't mean to go into a little bit of a tangent, but my biggest thing is God's grace. I want people to understand that grace
Yes.
is the most amazing thing and the most amazing gift that God has given us. Because for all the stuff that I've done in my life and the stuff that I probably mess up in eventually,
Mhm.
that grace, that forgiveness, that love, that He looks at you and say, okay, you know, I know you messed up, but I still love you. You know, that whole idea of that, that I don't deserve that, because I really don't. None of us do.
Yes.
For
Mhm.
Him to honor that sacrifice that He made, right? Is almost insult when you don't follow what you need to do. And I look at that and I say, oh my God, it's amazing. And this person who didn't know me from nothing, who doesn't deserve anything, I deserve, as Dante's Inferno, the seventh circle of hell,
Mhm.
died for me and took me out of there, right? And keeps
Mhm.
taking me out, because I tend to fall back. You know, everyone once in a while tends to fall back. And He is right there waiting and holding and saying, I'm still here. I'm not going nowhere. And I just want people to understand that God's grace, it's not something to take advantage of either. You know,
No,
it's not a
exactly.
game. It's
Mhm.
not a game. It's not, oh, I sin and come back, I sin again. No, no, it's not that. Because
Mhm.
if you do respect and you do honor Christ's sacrifice, then by you following Him is
Mhm.
honoring, right? So you want to honor Him. And that's our goal, is to honor Him. And yeah, I just really wanted to get that point across, because everything that I'm saying in my life and everything, it's not that I just kept doing the sin and saying, going back to God and saying, thank you, God, forgive me, and I'll go back.
Mhm.
No, it's that God had that grace and that love for me, that He gave me another chance. Like they say, 70 times seven, how many times, you know, and He did
Forgiveness.
that. So
Mhm.
I just wanted to say that, and you know, to get that point across.
That's a good way to put it, and for the listeners to understand that, because from what you share, you had a good support system. You have your family. Your wife was still, praying for you,
Mhm.
and you also were still connected to to God some way, somehow, even
Yes.
though you were struggling with this. And it sounds like you were in a bad environment, and that changed, and it helped you get stronger. And many of the listeners may not know, but addiction has a spiritual component to it, and
Mhm.
sometimes when we need God the most, that's when individuals also tend to gear towards addiction, because they have a void and they're trying to like feel it,
Correct. Correct.
but you were still connected. So you had that still that golden thread that we, can
Mhm.
can put as an example, connected still to God. and God was seeing, that you were struggling and brought you back in to, restructuring your life back and reparation on all that. Thank you for sharing that part. So my next question to you is, we learned from your bio that you had battled with Guillain-Barré syndrome, and I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly.
It's a strange word. It's actually Guillain-Barré syndrome or Guillain-Barre syndrome. But you know what's easier? Just say GBS. It's
Okay,
easier to just say GBS.
so it's more like the French,
Yeah, because the person who found the disease was a French
yeah.
doctor, I believe.
So you were intubated 6 days and your family was advised to prepare for the worst. Can
Correct.
you share about your journey with this disease and how God intervened in your life and how you were able to recover from it?
Sure.
And as a role model and Christian mentor, can you also share a word of encouragement for other listeners who may be struggling with adversity, addiction, homelessness, and health issues? And
Sure.
what has been the number one lesson that you learned through all these adversity?
Sure. It started about almost 4 years ago. I was running and I had lost some weight and I was running training to run marathons. And I had run a few what they call little 3 miles, 5 miles, and I was actually training for my first uh uh what they call a half K marathon in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
And the one day I woke up and I had a fever. And my wife said, okay, you could have caught a cold or something, and we were fine. But then that night, I ended up with 102, 103 fever. And we went to the hospital. And they checked me and they said that I had some sort of strep throat. Okay, that's fine. Went home and I went to my mom's for a few days. As you know, I don't know if being Spanish, mom's food is the medicine. I mean, there's nothing else. I would put my mom's food against any restaurant in the world, any medicine in the world.
Mm-hmm.
She's been blessed with that. She's a whole nother story as well. She's going through a lot.
Mm-hmm.
She's a fighter as well. Um, and I got a little better, came home, but that night, I ended up being almost 104 fever and I became septic.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
I ended up being taken to NYU hospital
Mm-hmm.
where the doctor told my wife he's very, very sick. They took a CAT scan or something of my lungs, and I only had 10% lung capacity. My lungs were
Mm-hmm.
fully blocked or filled. They till this day they don't really know exactly what caused that.
Mm-hmm.
So in order for them to try and save me, they had to intubate me.
Mm-hmm.
Now to intubate me, usually when you're intubated, now this is going during the whole COVID time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, I did not have COVID. That was not COVID. So that's one of the things that I want to make clear. I did not have COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up being intubated. Now, usually when you're intubated, within 3 to 4 days after you being intubated, your body starts to adjust to the machine. And
Yes.
if you take out the machine, you won't be able to breathe on your own.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor told my wife, he's very, very sick. We don't think, he's going to be able to get off the machine. So, obviously, my wife is like, nah, he's gonna get out the machine. And my mom, who's a prayer warrior, and I mean, it was just an amazing thing after everything that I find out at the end. But I ended up being intubated, and that's a whole nother thing that I went through while being intubated. I call it the empty. It was this
Mm-hmm.
part where I knew I was somewhere, but I felt that disconnect. I knew like I was not in a, as they say, I wasn't in hell, I wasn't in heaven, I wasn't none
Mm-hmm.
of that. It was just this cold emptiness. But you knew there was something on the other side. There was just that almost that veil where there was something there, but you still couldn't get to it.
Mm-hmm.
But you felt that empty, like that loneliness, but you knew that you wouldn't be lonely once it's there. Um, and that's what I felt during that time. Um, Now and then, in giving all glory to God, I woke up. I woke up in 6 days. Um,
Wow.
they woke me up. Obviously, I ended up being in the hospital for a very long time. And what happened was, and let me explain a little bit about what Guillain-Barré is. Guillain-Barré is a neurological disease. What it is if you, let me give an example of a wire. You know, a wire has a plastic around the insides of the wire, right?
Yes.
So you, if the Guillain-Barré is your white blood cells, your antibodies attacking your own white blood cells because they think that it's something wrong with your body. So there's something sick. So they want to attack it.
Mm-hmm.
So what it does, it attacks your nerve ending. So what it did was it ate the outside mesh of my nerve endings. So
Mm-hmm.
I get paralysis. So paralysis, I have no legs and all that at the time. I could not move my legs. I could not walk. Now there are people who get it worse. There are people that have it where their eyes don't close. They can't blink, or it gets to the point where the lungs stop working because the brain signal, the electrical signal, is blocked.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up in the hospital, unable to move my legs and totally neuropathic, which means my whole body is numb. It's almost like
Mm-hmm.
when when you put your hand on and you held on it for a while and it ends up being asleep.
Yes,
That's
yes.
what my body feels now every day.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
but God is amazing. I was in the hospital for almost 2.5 months, 3 months. Um, and I left there in a very, very dark place. I hated God. I hated him more than, and I'll be honest, the word hate I know is strong, but that's how deep it was.
Mm-hmm.
That was how
Mm-hmm.
angry I was, because I was at the time really, really trying to find God. Right, I was really trying to understand what He was about, and
Mm-hmm.
this happened. So obviously, we don't look at ourselves like it's something that happens. Is we blame it on God. Look, God, I was trying to, and
Mm-hmm.
I sort of deconstructed. I started to look for other ways to say, God is not God. This isn't God. God, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole nother. But I became very, very, very depressed, very depressed, very angry. I was diagnosed with PTSD, and then diagnosed with chronic manic depression.
Mm-hmm.
I have another, I was admitted for suicide uh, about 3 years ago because that's how
Mm-hmm.
bad it got to that point. But then, and I was telling this to another gentleman that I was talking to, my road to deconstruction became my road to reconstruction
Mm-hmm.
because I looked so much to prove God wrong that He proved Himself right to me. He
Wow.
showed
Deep.
me
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff. I was trying so bad to say, well, I went the philosophical route. I was trying to look at everything because I'm a very logical person, right? I try to look
Mm-hmm.
at everything logically. So I was trying to look at God logically through my logic, not
Mm-hmm.
God's logic, which we'll never understand. And God, and through everything I've read, everything I looked, God just kept telling me, no, I am who I am. I am. That's it. You just need to understand. You may not get it, and it got to a point where it was like, okay, I know you got me out of where I was. You took me out of there. I survived. I'm breathing. I'm still in a wheelchair, but I am
Mm-hmm.
able to function and walk around with a walker or with canes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I still am fully neuropathic, which means I have full body neuropathy. But it is something I thank God every day because of this
Mm-hmm.
adversity and this. I have, I've where I am now.
Yeah.
I Because if I didn't do it, I would never have done the podcast. I would
Mm-hmm.
have never written any of my books. I wouldn't have done the blogs. I wouldn't have done the website. I wouldn't be involved in any of this stuff if it wasn't everything that I went through the last 4 years, you know,
Wow.
and all the understanding of what God has, everything I've been through in my whole life, where it's culminated now, where I have to tell my story and I have to share what's in my heart and what's always been in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
Always afraid to say it or always afraid to show it. And but now, this is the time. I'm at an age where, I don't care. God is who He is. God is coming. God is real. Christ is
Mm-hmm.
the only way. It's simple, no question. I don't care what you say. It is just the way it is. Like they say, I think C.S. Lewis said it. If God isn't real, but if he's not, then okay. But if he's real, I'd rather be wrong. I'd rather be
Mm-hmm.
right than wrong. You know what I mean? I know
Mm-hmm.
I butchered that quote, but I'd rather be right than wrong. You know, I'd rather
Mm-hmm.
get in there with the skin of my teeth than not at all. So, you know, that's it. It's where I've been. Now, you ask me, what would I tell people who have been through something like that? First off, understand that situations that happen are not under your control per se, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can put ourselves in situations that get us in trouble, then yes. But there are certain things that we don't have control over. So the first thing and I'm learning, and I'm still in the process of learning, is not getting upset at things we have no control over.
Yes,
We
very
control the
important.
weather. We can't control the weather. We can't control when the flu comes around. We can't control when a bug comes in or whatever. I couldn't control that I got sick. It's nobody's fault. It's what it is. And
Mm-hmm.
um you have to realize that not everything is um God's fault. It's
Yes,
not
and
always God's fault.
mhm.
It's you may have created. I had underlying conditions. I was diabetic. I was diabetic. I had high blood pressure. I had underlying. So at the time, obviously, you don't see that. You think it's all God's fault. But the other thing is, you know, pray to just talk to God. I'm
Yes.
not asking you to make a massive prayer. We're not asking for thou goddess, thou is greatest. No, we're not asking that. What I'm asking you is just be real with God. Talk to him like you would talk to anybody else. And eventually you'll get to learn how to pray with God. Just talk. Talk to God. Sometimes you realize when you're talking, you end up praying.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking, and that's what prayer is. It's a one-on-one conversation, back and forth. You know, not all the time will God answer you, but he will. You
Yes,
know, and
eventually, yes.
that's another thing. Just talk to God. Don't keep it. I know it hurts. I know you're in pain. I know there's the things where you're like, yeah, there's no God. But sometimes just even if you think there's some other air, whatever you think, just talk. Just say to God, say, God, listen, I don't know if you're listening, but this is my situation.
Mm-hmm.
And third, look for help. Mental health therapy is very important.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fighter for that because there's a huge stigma within Christianity and mental health therapy. And I believe that both can be used together.
Yes.
What I was saying is the last part of is also look for help. I know we all we pray to God. Obviously, the number one helper in our lives is God, right? Is Christ. But he also puts people in our lives that will help us with those situations, be it mental health, be it physical, whatever. God bless those people with that. So please don't be afraid. Christian, non-Christian, faith, non-faith, look for help, ask for help, question it. So that's my advice to everyone who's going through something.
Great words of encouragement. And from what you were sharing, and throughout the whole podcast, what I was thinking about was the story of Job,
Mm-hmm.
how he was going through very difficult situations and he was being tested and tried. And you mentioned at one point, you said that you almost like hated God,
Mm-hmm.
but from what I was understanding, I felt like maybe you were maybe upset at God that the situations were going on because when we get to that point that so many things have started piling up on us and we start questioning, well, God, why are you letting this happen? But if we reflect back to Job's situation, he was questioning in at some, some at one point, but he didn't allow himself to get angry at God.
Right. That's where the
It's like
difference
turning
between
it
me and
around.
Job is. Job was a man of honor, right? It was a man who
Yes.
sinned against God and whatever. But he is a huge example of how we should act, right? When we're going
Mm-hmm.
through adversity, is to not be angry at God, but
Yes.
be be understanding of God and that He's got you. He's got
Yes.
you through this. So yeah.
Yes. And he was able to reflect. You mentioned also that you started searching for, throughout the podcast, you mentioned that you were started to researching or searching for other answers.
Yes.
And Job was looking into, like nature. He was talking about nature, how God created the world. So he was getting more, how you say, deeper into
Mm-hmm.
that. area of learning more about God while he was going through that whole difficult situation instead of, moving away. And I just wanted to share that example.
Yes. Thank you.
Um, Thank you for sharing such a remarkable story.
Yes.
You have gone through a lot of difficult situations, but like you said, God's grace has been with you from the beginning. And
Mm.
because you have that calling, you mentioned now that you can use all these things that you have learned throughout this whole thing to help others. And that was the purpose. That's why he was pulling you and calling you to get
Yeah, yeah.
closer to
And
him.
going through all that, to get to where I am now, and I think it's just gonna get better.
Yes,
It's gonna get harder, but it's gonna get better.
yes,
If you know what I
yes,
mean.
yes, yes. Well, thank you so much for
Thank you.
being my guest
Thank you for
at
having me.
Being Encouraged podcast. And God bless you. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you, and God bless.